Welcome to the Rainbow Connection podcast, where we explore the intersection between queer culture and nerd culture. I'm your host, Allison Hadley, and with me today is Brittany Rudyck.
Hello, I'm Brittany, and my pronouns are she, her, and I am so excited to be on this podcast today talking about all things, most things, queer horror with you.
So what draws you into horror, or specifically the queer aspects of horror?
Well, I've been a horror fan as long as I can remember. I was watching creepy things as a kid, digging in the dirt, making witches' potions. I'm Métis Ukrainian, so I feel like queer horror in particular gives a place for some of these aspects of my identity as a queer woman, as a Métis person, to connect to a sense of otherness, but in a way that, I don't know, it feels grounding to me to watch a horror movie. A lot of people watch like comedies or like romantic stuff to unwind, but I put on something creepy, and I feel like that is my connection to these parts of myself that are outside the realm of normalcy or normative culture, I suppose. So queer horror has always felt like home to me.
That's great. Like when you say grounding, like what does that kind of look or feel like to you? Like what specifically about horror does that as opposed to something else?
I feel like, well, as also someone with anxiety and depression, I feel like placing my anxiety watching creepy content or something that'll scare me or jostle my nervous system. It's almost like a way of controlling my experience of anxiety in a way. So for me, having something creepy on screen or something that makes me uncomfortable or grossed out or disgusted, I feel like that's a healthy way of digesting some of those feelings. And so it grounds me in that way because it helps place discomfort.
And the thing about that as well is, at the end of, 90 minutes or 2.5 hours, then, it turns off. And for me, it's really bad on the screen. Hey, there's some horrific stuff. And when it's off, it feels a little less horrific in day-to-day life. Mm-hmm. At least that's what I find. So one thing I wanted to do today is I wanted to discuss some specific movies. So we have a couple that were suggestions, and we also both picked a couple that we would get into here.
Yes.
So do you want to start with one of your picks first?
Sure, yes. I chose two sapphic vampire movies from the same year, 1971.
A good year. Very
good year for horror. And that whole early 70s Hammer film onslaught of hyper-sexualized, mostly vampire movies, I think is just like really special to a lot of sapphics, myself included, because I think even though it's still made for the male gaze, I think a lot of like queer women and sapphic folks took on these films because there is such like a sexiness that wasn't seen as much on film at the time, and even I think still rings through in a special way even in 2025 when we're talking about them. So these two, Lust for a Vampire and Daughters of Darkness, are really, really special. So I'm excited that we got to watch them and we get to talk about them.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited to talk about them as well. And one of the things I find specifically in that era of horror, like from I'd say like 71 to about 77, 78 or so, is not only the exploration of some of the othering factors of things and casts where they're 85% women, which was pretty unheard of. So it's always set in like a conservatory or like a finishing school or something like that, which I find is an interesting setting and kind of flies in the face of what was going on with a lot of other film genres at the time, where it was still very male-centric and male-focused. So I think that's an interesting aspect there as well. And there's also... at the time, and still now, there's people who are employed in the arts that are queer, but they're tasked with making straight media. So then they can, at the same time, they can put in little nuggets for people. And as queer viewers, we are searching for those nuggets. And that's why we'll talk a bit later about Suspiria, but like Suspiria is not overtly a queer film. Like, there's no one who is outwardly queer. There's no one who says it on camera. But it's a pretty queer film. And that's because these nuggets are placed there, and, like, sapphics and other queer people found those nuggets, and they embraced and cherished those nuggets. The first movie that you suggested for this podcast is Daughters of Darkness. So I'm familiar with the movie, having just watched it, but what can you tell us about it?
Sure. So briefly, if you haven't seen the film, it's on Shudder. You can go watch it. It's about this newly married couple who are arriving to their destination wedding, where this ancient Countess Bathory has historically vacationed. So she returns to this town with her consort, Alona. Alona, I think is her name. And she sets her eyes on this newly married woman and decides that she must have her. So it becomes this power play between Countess Bathory and the new husband and the wife and Alona, the existing consort.
Who was kind of struggling with some things of her own.
Yeah, 100%. So it's really like a beautifully set, like stunning film about queer relationships and power dynamics. And trigger alert, there's a lot of domestic violence in this film, in case that's something that you need to be mindful of as you're engaging with this content. But it's really beautifully shot, and the set design and costuming is really beautiful. So that's Daughters of Darkness.
Okay, and then your second movie that you selected is Lust for a Vampire.
So Lust for a Vampire is quite similar, I would say. So there's this resurrected ancient vampire that's brought to life in this town, this vaguely European pastoral setting near to a finishing school for girls. And so she comes back to life, enrolls in this finishing school, and, gets into some love situations and also takes the lives of a lot of people, and it ends in absolute chaos. So that one's really good. And then some like exorbitant heterosex scenes that are very funny and entertaining.
Lust for a Vampire. Let's start there. What made you choose that one to discuss today?
Well, I think what you were just saying about Suspiria, where it's not necessarily an overtly queer film or sapphic film, the setting suggests as much. So I like Lust for a Vampire because it's this finishing school where these buxom blonde, like pseudo-European women are frolicking about with their tits out, massaging each other, going for skinny dips. And I love that it's just so obvious, not only in the way that the women are sexualized, but in the nature of the friendships and relationships between the women is so special. And I think there's an inherent queerness in female relationships, just irrespective or aside from sexualizing the relationships, because we're taught that being vulnerable and being in close friendships is, I don't know, mostly for men, I guess, but not something that we need to put too much emphasis on, because we're taught that romantic, straight relationships are the be-all, end-all.
Those are the relationships that matter, right?
They're the ones that count, yes. So in this setting, this finishing school, these women are sweet to each other. They're, massaging each other. They're learning together. They're playing in fields whimsically. And I just think there's something so, like, pastoral and whimsical and beautiful about that certain portrayal of queerness to me.
even the first time I watched it, when we're introduced to the women of the finishing school, and they're all just like lounging on the steps, and they've all got scarves, and they're all posed dramatically, and it's like, okay, yeah, I'm here for this. This is pretty cool,
right? Yeah, and it's so beautiful. The costumes, I think, are so lovely, and like I want some of those nightgowns. Like
right?
they just make your titties look so good.
Absolutely.
They just look so good.
And we appreciate that.
Yes,
yeah,
we really do. And I love the, Joseph Sheridan Le Fanu is credited at the opening of the film, which is the author of Carmilla, one of the most classical, canonically sapphic vampire novels to date, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not really anything like the novel, but they use the name Carmilla when they bring the like head vampiress in, who is attracting all these women and killing the young women in the village. There's always that aspect of the narrative where young girls start mysteriously dying. And I kind of like that it's like at the hands of an older woman. There's kind of like a queer power dynamic within that narrative, I think, also being explored, that I find interesting. Despite the lust for a vampire, there's this one scene that you and I were talking about before we started filming with the song Strange Love, and then it's all colorful and technicolor and
awkward
and it's this bland man capturing the attention of this beautiful Carmilla vampire character, and it always kind of goes in that direction, even if it's beautiful and sapphic and the ladies are hanging out with these lush fabrics. There's always this one
kind
mediocre
nothing burger dude, yeah.
yes, who comes in, swoops into this vampire's life and takes her away from her beautifully chaotic life of blood-sucking and sapphic orgies, presumably. So there's always that kind of ruins the vibe a little bit. But this was funny, at least. That scene was hilarious.
It was like, I think it was quite the mismatch in terms of music. I'm like, it just took me out of, I'm like, this could be hot. No, it's not.
It's not. And you contrast that with like the opening sex scene in Daughters of Darkness, where it's this like young married couple on a train, and they have this kind of like steamy encounter as newlyweds, and I'm like, all right, like as a bisexual queen, like I can get down with this. It's pretty good. But the lust for a vampire scene was just comical, and then it's followed by this montage of things that have already happened in the movie, just in case you forgot.
Yeah. It's not even that long of a movie. It's like an hour and a half long, but
yeah,
you gotta fill that time, I guess, right?
Yes. Yes.
So I know you have some thoughts on the ending of that movie. Do you want to get into that a bit? Like, spoiler alert for something that's released in 1971,
yes.
But I just think it's an incredible ending, and we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about that.
Yes, so I love how both of these films sort of end in like a non-classical staking of the vampire, which I think is interesting that they do this with the female leads. I find that curious, as opposed to a lot of the male forward vampire films that are just, I don't know, kind of non-dramatically killed in a lot of regards, or maybe that's just me who thinks that. But the fire staking in Lust for a Vampire is so good. I also love the vampire reanimation scene where she comes back to life, and it's like kind of underneath this fabric and her body's getting reanimated,
and you just see like the blood over the face area, and then it starts moving. And
I thought that was really well done, really good for 1971. But the staking, I think, is really symbolic and awesome. And I mean, we have to talk about the Daughters of Darkness staking, because when you first asked me to do this podcast, I immediately wanted to do that film because the ending is like so sexy. These beautiful women are like getting away, more or less. They're driving off in the car, and they're like handsy with each other, and they're like, just wait, we're almost across the border. And
faster.
And then Countess Bathory, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing this woman's name, but they get into an accident. She just flies out of the windshield and lands so perfectly on the stake through her heart. And it's like sad, because I wanted to see them have their happy ending.
Yeah.
But then we go on to see...
They're trying to outrace the sunlight.
Yes, exactly. And so it's hilarious. Like, from a camp perspective, it's hilarious. But then we see the other character move on, and she takes up the mantle of being the countess, and she goes on to feasting upon the luscious necks of other buxom beauties.
Yes, as one does.
As one does.
And I do like that both of the movies that you suggested, they both have a countess as the lead, and they're both in like, settings where you would get a lot of attractive young women, and it's like there are similarities. And so one is, Daughters of Darkness is the inspiration is Elizabeth Bathory, which is how they pronounce it in the film. It's more of a Bathory, I believe, right?
Bathory.
I've heard Bathory, but I've also just heard like really bad anglicization of a lot of things, so it's hard to say. So how do you think that depiction was versus the historical character and the fictional representation in Daughters of Darkness?
Well, I think these films are interesting too, because I was kind of picking up on some like class disparities. And so the original countess, the historical figure, would bathe in the blood of her young female servants. Allegedly. And so I think it's interesting that in that depiction, from what we know or don't know, whatever's true, she is feasting upon or killing these lower class sort of servant girls. And in these films, the women are kind of poking fun and getting at the heart of aristocracy and the higher class. So I think that's an interesting distinction between what could be reality and how fictionally there's still, like Countess Bathory is like beautifully adorned and wearing these gorgeous outfits, and her makeup is like, oh my God, that face.
Without flaw,
stunning. But she's still, I think, playing with the idea of stabbing in. I'm making these stabbing actions, stabbing into like these upper class men, and the guy that the husband, I can't remember any of the characters' names off the top of my head, but he's a jerk. The
important one though.
Yeah, the main one. Yeah, Countess Bathory. She's the most important. But he's like this upper class guy who's embarrassed of his wife because she's lower class, and so he treats her like worse and worse throughout the film. Like this guy is just outed as a jerk.
I was gonna say it's like, a super healthy cis-het relationship there that is unshakable because that is, the correct way to do it, right?
Indeed. Yeah. And she's just like normalized this treatment from her husband. And then Countess Bathory comes in and she's like, you don't have to put up with this. Like, come away with me. Like, I'll treat you well. And whether or not that's true, it remains to be seen, or will never be seen because she's dead.
Well, they were both kind of stoked about it at the end.
Yeah. But he's like this rich guy who's ashamed of his wife. And so I think her inserting herself into this little like, badly shapen throuple situation that's presented to us is an interesting way of looking at class too.
And do you think there's any importance then that the countesses, I don't know what the title would be for, I think her name's Ilona, but like sort of like essentially her consort at the time, how they kind of split up, and the countess went for the wife and Ilona went for the husband. Do you think there's a class statement there as well?
I wonder. It's almost like she's passing her off to like be a distraction to the husband. I'm not sure, but there was so much potential there for them to just be a little like polyamorous angel crew. But I feel like I don't want to blame men too much. Like, bless them as a lover of men as well. But this guy just couldn't keep his chill. He couldn't just take it, in a good way and calm down about it.
Zero chill, that guy.
Zero chill. You could have had such a good thing.
Yeah.
Buddy.
So,
Buddy.
Yes, buddy.
Buddy.
When you're talking about like sort of these elaborate death scenes for the female leads in these vampire films, and how a lot of the male ones have a little more standard, like, oh, stake through the heart, oh no, sunlight, that sort of thing. Do you think there's maybe a correlation between them being a little more queer-coded? Like, a lot of times in the male-focused vampire movies, like, it's female victims and targets and what have you else. But now that when you get a little more ambiguity in the victims and there's, like, sexual tension between two women on screen, and at the time there was... it was pretty common practice that if there's any queer story, it has to have a tragedy in it. That, okay, they can't both make it out of this movie. Do you think that might have factored into sort of the maybe the more elaborate plannings of deaths for the female leads in these?
That's an interesting thought. For me, what I was thinking about when I was kind of contrasting the two types of death between, like 1932, like Todd Browning's Dracula, he just kind of dies off screen and you don't really get to see it. And obviously the 30s were a different time than the 1970s. But it's almost like, to me, these women have these outlandish, over the top deaths because queer women are seen as like monstrosities, and it's almost like an overt punishment that they're not only monsters.
It's like beyond that, it's even worse.
Exactly. They're not only bloodthirsty vampires, but they're also queer women. So like, how dare they have this additional layer to their character? So to me, it's almost like an additional punishment.
Yeah, teach them a lesson, right? Like it's step out of your box in more than one way, and it's not appreciated.
Exactly.
No, that's fair.
May they rest in peace.
May they rest in peace, or however they rest when they crumble up, or
in dust.
Whatever.
Rest
yeah,
in
like,
dust.
Yeah, like get reabsorbed into the soil or what have you.
Yes.
So I'll go with a couple of my picks then, and as people who don't like me online would be upset if I didn't make this all about being trans. So I picked a couple films based on gender identity and how they kind of changed through the years throughout the genre. So first I wanted to start with Sleepaway Camp from 1983, which is, a fairly, for the most part, pretty standard like summer camp slasher movie. Like we've all seen a bunch of these, and I won't spoil it because we're going to get into that more, but it's kind of only sticking around in any way into the cultural zeitgeist because of the twist ending that no one saw coming. And it's not great for representation, but it's what we had at the time. And then I wanted to contrast that by watching They/Them, which it's important to pronounce the slash and not just say they, them, from 2022, which is about a gay conversion camp. So they're also like you did the two sort of like the conservatory girls' school type things with the vampire. Mine are both camp movies. So I figured that's an easy way to contrast them. And this is just about, I think it brings a lot of light to the people who try to like convert with kindness, or I'm the cool person. I'm not going to force you to be straight, but sure, it'd be great if you were. And it's, I think Kevin Bacon puts in a pretty terrifying performance in it. I think he kind of nails that. But it's interesting for such a gender diverse cast that learns things in different ways about themselves and about the world around them. And I think that's a really interesting take on the genre. It's not as much a slasher as Sleepaway Camp, or most of them, like I would hesitate to call it a slasher. It's more of, I'd say, like a thriller, coming of age thriller. Yeah, we'll say that.
Yeah.
And but I think it's interesting. So start with Sleepaway Camp. Because I like moving chronologically. So you're familiar with Sleepaway Camp, right?
Yes, I rewatched it ahead of joining you today, and I forgot how like overtly 80s it is. And I was noting just like the representation of gender between the two films, of course, and how far we've come since 1983. And They/Them had a very gender diverse cast, and is way more reflective of people that I get to call my friends in this day and age. But in 1983, it was just like horrific the way some of these kids are treated at this camp, and mostly noted how many times they screamed Angela. I should have been making a note.
Oh,
Angela!
That's a drinking game if you want to get absolutely destroyed.
Truly.
But yeah, like I saw someone say when I was looking up reviews and stuff that Sleepaway Camp out 80s the 80s.
Truly. Yes.
Like every sort of hallmark of every sort of 80s cheese was there. Horror and other genres as well. I'm going to try my best to speak respectfully about the characters and the people that they are portraying, but it is difficult to do when the media itself is unkind to them. So when it comes to, in terms of pronouns and names, it's handled pretty indelicately, so I'll do what I can to contemporize it a bit, but there are still some challenges in that, so I did want to note that. At the beginning, there is a scene where, like, a father and two children are run over by a boat.
Yes.
And, you know, it's not a good scene. It's a tragedy. Okay, movie starts. Then we go to camp, and, you know, there's a bit of a gap in between. People start dying in gruesome ways, and they're usually kind of trash, so we're not really sad at these deaths. But we're like, oh, they're not here anymore. Oh, no. And it's revealed at the end that the person, actually, I'll just say maybe we edit this to the front, so I'll just leave a gap, and at the end of the movie, it is realized that the person who committed these murders is actually one of the children from the beginning of the film. However, it is the boy child that has been living as the girl child. And, you know, sort of the implication that that would be something that would drive someone mad or make someone into a murderer. And it's done a lot of, I think it's probably done a lot of harm in terms of people's views that you know, gender transition is an unhealthy thing. Mm-hmm. And there's any number of films where that's shown, like, that's kind of the gotcha, like, or even Law and Order episodes where they're looking in some guy's claws and they see a dress, like, oh, this sicko, he's obviously the one who did it.
Totally.
And so it's a trope, but it's, I think, very prevalent here, because when there's the big reveal, like, there's actually, like, a genital reveal.
Yes.
And it's not just the genital reveal that keys us into what happened here, is that it's also, the character's also making this horrific noise.
Yes.
And has this terrifying face.
Truly.
So when I first saw it, I was like, the face, like, what is wrong with their face? Like, how is it going like that? And what is the sound? But the gotcha is supposed to be like, oh, there's a penis there.
It's actually a boy.
Exactly. That's supposed to be the shocking part. But I'm like, so it's an interesting choice when you're doing that shock reveal at the end of the movie, that it's all these horrific things are happening, but that's what we're supposed to be focusing on as the truly terrible part about this character. And, well, obviously this person would be the one who's been killing people at the camp. Mm-hmm. And then it also shows this little flashback of, after the accident, there is, you know, this child with their head bandaged up. So it's kind of like, oh, hey, maybe is this one of the kids from the beginning? And it's basically stated that, you know, the adoptive mother decided to raise this child as a girl because they already had a boy.
Yes.
Which is, you know, classic reasoning, right? Like, it's just the flimsiest, most, I don't know, bizarre reasoning that we already have one boy, we can't have two.
Well, and it's interesting too, because it's like someone prescribing this child's gender, and it's really ambiguous for us as viewers to know, like, is Angela, is this the way that she wants to be perceived, or is this just like an identity that's foisted upon her that she's then vilified for? Like, that was always kind of tricky to me.
It's never expressed what Angela actually wants.
Yeah.
Which is a weird thing to, you know, both take away the autonomy and create a narrative about gender diverse people. Mm-hmm. And I think, you know, something that feeds into that is when you see, you know, the narratives floating around nowadays about parents just, like, transitioning their children too young. So it creates sort of a thing like that. Like, no one's citing this as a source. Mm-hmm. But people have watched this movies and like, wow, that's all it was, is this mother decided that this kid was a girl, and then they're a girl, and that's, you know, unacceptable for any number of reasons. So it's just, I find it surprisingly topical in that regard with a lot of the rhetoric that's floating around now.
Yes.
So
about supportive parents who are listening to their children and their children's ability to know themselves better than their parents are able to. And it kind of vilifies supportive parents of trans or gender diverse children for allowing them to live their lives in a very clumsy way, albeit, but yeah. It says a lot about how we perceive transitioning and who gets a say, especially in the realm of gender diverse children. People don't believe that children know themselves well enough to make that decision for themselves. So I think that's a really interesting comment.
And in that sort of flashback scene, I think it's very interesting that Angela does not say a word.
Yes.
Does not say yes, does not say no, has a completely blank, neutral expression throughout the whole thing.
And the rest of the film as well.
Generally, yes.
Yeah.
But it's... So I find it's an interesting choice to kind of seemingly have this child that is bereft of autonomy.
Mm-hmm.
And... yeah, and I'm sure people's minds went places with that, and they still do when they see them. And you even look at reviews and stuff of that and the portrayal, and like, if this is the first time a lot of people in the 80s actually see representation of a gender diverse person, it doesn't leave a great impression.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it was actually one of the first ones that I saw when I was a child.
Yeah.
And my takeaway was a little different with it, is when I saw it, yes, there's this boy that has been raised as a girl now, and my brain's like, oh, so that's possible. Like, I don't have to do this. I don't have to be trapped in this place where I am right now. Like, obviously, I don't want all of this trauma and the dead family, and I don't want to commit murders at a summer camp.
What?
But it still made me think of the possibilities. And that also made me question why we were supposed to be looking downwards at that big reveal of who the murderer was as well. Because at that point, that wasn't just a gender reveal. That was also the reveal of who the murderer was. That was a 2-for-1.
Yes.
So it was a very conscious decision. And like beyond that, I still, oddly enough, felt a little seen by it, which is a weird thing in horror because you can go into challenging areas and you can explore them in sometimes brutal or horrific fashion, but you're still exploring those areas and you can still take those lessons from it. So I know that's a problematic thing for young me to sort of say, like, hey, me too. like I feel seen by this thing. But honestly, when I was a child, if like preteen me had social media, like that girl getting canceled before recess, like I had some views back then, and it's how I was processing. Like my brain was still growing, right?
Yes.
And so it was just like, but even something like that made me think like, okay, maybe things can be a little different.
Yeah, and I would even struggle to say that's problematic because there's so few, especially at that time, positive representations of gender diversity in horror or any genre for that matter. And it makes me think of depictions of again, like the feminine as monstrous, like Norman Bates in Psycho is like pathologized in such a way that because, maybe he was a little out there because he, kept his dead mother's corpse around and did some nefarious things in her name. But I feel like these depictions classically are about like men who have even an ounce of feminine energy, even if they're not trans or gender diverse, but how othered they are and how vilified they are and pathologized for just like even having a whim to express themselves by wearing a dress.
And how it makes everyone else so visibly uncomfortable throughout all of these pieces of media.
Exactly. Right? And it's like ingrained deeply to view like anything masculine to even touch on the feminine is like a societal transgression that should never be explored or entertained, or otherwise you don't belong.
It's like a degradation of the masculine ideal, right?
Yes.
Like it's like you have the certain thing, you have the good thing. Why do you want to go to the less good thing?
Exactly.
So that's weird. So there's got to be something broken with you, right?
Exactly.
But then pivoting from that to they/them, which, not a brilliant piece of cinema, but I thought it was really enjoyable and a film that was clearly made by a queer person. And I have a friend who watches a lot of the same horror movies that I do, but she is cisgender, heterosexual, and nothing wrong with that. Don't get me wrong. That's okay. It happens. It's not anyone's fault.
Your identity is valid.
Absolutely, your identity is valid. But she comes to me to sort of translate queer horror and be like, okay, I kind of got this, but I feel like I'm missing some layers here. And I had a long talk with her about they/them. And I did also I saw the TV Glow as well, because she's like, I think I like that, but I don't know if I understand it. And I'm like, okay, we'll chat.
Yes.
Because there's the context is when we start they/them, well, it's like the second scene, but you're introduced you're introduced to something before, but then when you get to the camp and you see, Kevin Bacon is the leader of the camp, and he steps out and he gives this talk to these kids. And it's a very sort of approachable, I'm the cool youth pastor kind of vibes, where he's trying to say, like, yeah, this is a conversion camp, but we're not going to convert you. Like, we just want you to find out who you really are.
For yourselves.
And the thing is, like, I think a lot of us know these type of people. And they're people that we've experienced and we've had in our lives where they're like, oh, yeah, I support you, but don't do it over there. Or like,
I don't want to see it.
I don't want to see it. Or, you know, it's just, we want it to be your choice.
Yeah, the framing of that opening speech was so interesting to me.
And like, whereas some people I've talked to, they're like, oh yeah, this guy seems actually kind of nice, he's chill and stuff like that. But like, if you realize like sort of the weaponized therapy speak, and like just the general vibes of it, and like what he's saying, like when, you know, there's, you know, our non-binary King Jordan is like, well, which cabin do I go to? And it says there's no non-binary cabin. And then right after that, Kevin Bacon's like, oh, but we're so inclusive here. But yeah, go with the men's cabin.
Yeah, like, we'll look into it. No, they won't.
No, they're not going to look into it. They're not going to build a third cabin for like one kid a year.
No.
Like, no.
No. Yeah, that whole speech was like exactly what you're saying, and meant to be disarming so that they start to like open these kids' brains up to be brainwashed essentially. And Kevin Bacon's wife, the therapist psycho lady, oh my goodness, that scene where she is, quote unquote, air quotes here, providing therapy to Jordan, our non-binary angel, that was distressing. And that, I feel like, is just such a softer version of what kids in real time are experiencing at these places, but also in their homes, from their families, where it's people who think they're being well-meaning and just being the most violent and vicious to these children possible. Like, that was a shocking scene.
It was. It felt like it was a month's worth of family arguments distilled into a 4-minute clip of a therapy session.
Yeah.
Like, it was really intense and really powerful, and it's, you know, hard not to hear some of that, right? Like, like, I think it was interesting that before that, they were actually going through the children's belongings to kind of find dirt on them in order to rip them apart.
Yes.
And I think it's important to show that kind of insidious care that is prevalent in a lot of things. It's prevalent in terms of, you know, people will do that to, you know, even to the point of like denying care or denying things. It's like, oh, well, you're obviously confused, so we know what's best.
Yes.
So there's a lot of that banter, and then that's how they find out what's best, right? Is like, oh, well, this child has some trauma regarding this thing, so we can lean into that to push our agenda. And
weaponize it, all under the guise of protecting the children, which is a very, very loud rhetoric that we see in a lot of right-wing spaces. It's all done under this notion that, like you're saying, adults know what's best for children, and it takes away so much autonomy from the kids to be able to know what is best for them. And it's violent. You said insidious care, and I think that's a really good way of putting it, because I don't know, do these people know that they're being hurtful, or do they genuinely think that what they're doing is right? Like, I always wrestle with that in my own mind, seeing like scenes like that play out. Like, they really must believe this.
That's the thing where it's difficult, and I think that's part of the challenging things that makes it scary. Is you can't say their intent for sure, because like, I'm sure there are times when both of those are true. Like, there's going to be people who think they are meaning well, and they're just, you know, so firmly entrenched in their beliefs that they know that their way is the one correct way. So why wouldn't I want to help this wayward youth? And then there's other ones that I'm sure approach it from a more manipulative standpoint, that they, you know, are looking to twist the brains to achieve a goal. And yeah, it was just interesting to see that reflected in a horror movie of all places. Like, I'd expect to see it in maybe like some sort of queer art house film, but like...
I have a question for you, because we were talking about sleepaway camp as being, you know, the end is kind of like a reveal and jump scare, and in the end vilifies this trans girl who is the killer. in They/Them, I feel like something similar happens where the killer is revealed to be the nurse at the camp who takes the place of someone who is actually coming in. And she had gone through the conversion camp, and she had come back to kind of wreak havoc and punish the people that had treated her so badly and physically and emotionally tortured her. She comes back as the killer, and she invites Jordan into her rampage, basically, and says, let's go to other conversion camps and we'll get them all. And so in a way, it kind of points to the same ending where this queer person who has been subjected to untold traumas is then also vilified in a way. So we can comment on like the differences in how the portrayals of genderqueer people are from film to film, but ultimately I almost feel like they're doing the same thing in the end.
Kind of like, Jordan's kind of, to an extent, like, even though they are kind of the driving force behind a lot of these things, they're kind of also just along for the ride as well, right? And I think that ending or that possible twist comes from, there's that scene where they're trying to get, the children to shoot the dog.
Oh, God. I blocked that out of my brain.
Yeah, I'm sorry for bringing that up. But yeah.
The Hound.
But yeah, so old Duke the Hound is, Kevin Bacon's character is trying to get one of the children to shoot it, to, man up. And while this child is getting berated, our non-binary sovereign Jordan just steps up and just shoots the dog, and then Kevin Bacon goes like, there's my killer. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of almost planting that seed, because then at that point we didn't know that it was the nurse. We're like, wait a minute, is it Jordan? But they seem so amazing. Like, they're so welcoming and so friendly, especially when they out that trans girl. Mm-hmm. And
Alexandra.
Just the kindness shown towards Alexandra, and the support and the friendship and stuff like that. So, we're rooting for Jordan. But then it's like, oh, wait a minute, maybe there's something there. And then I thought it was interesting when they came to the end, that it's almost bringing them in, and it's, oh, are they going to like, spoiler, they didn't. Mm-hmm. But there's that moment, and that's where it's just, okay, so you're just like the best person in this camp.
Yeah.
We get it.
Yeah, we get it. You're amazing.
But that is a good point. Like, that's not, like, I thought of like the obvious similarities, like them being both at camps and stuff like that, and just having gender stories at their core in one way or another. But that is an excellent point. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was kind of like, I was excited. I was like, yeah, get them. They're so evil. Get them. But then I was like, oh, but they're kind of doing the same thing where they're painting this person with, so much trauma as, this psychotic person, serial killer.
And that's the thing is, like, even though there is such progress and there's so much better representation, there is still, a gender diverse person at the core of it being pushed along in addition to or in spite of their traumas. That's you can't fix that or move on, but here, just horrific thing after horrific thing. It's not enough for you to struggle with who you are, but now these things are happening and you can't really escape them. Mm-hmm. So
it's a sad note.
Yeah, it's we have fun here on the Rainbow Connection. We're a fun podcast, and we talk about fun things with fun people. So we're really glad everyone's here.
Well, I will say one of my favorite deaths in the They/Them film was the very end, when Kevin Bacon was thrust upon his own like taxidermy rhinoceros horn or whatever that was. I'm like, that's good. That's like a nice phallic, funny death for this horrible conversion camp pastor to face.
Yeah, for this like super, homophobic, transphobic person to be like, what a suitable end.
Right? He got penetrated.
Yeah,
he did. That was, I really appreciated that symbolism in that death.
Yeah, yeah. So, the other couple movies that we want to talk about today,
yes,
are the two Suspiria films.
Mm-hmm.
And do you want to give us a little intro as to each of them, and then we can talk about how they differ and like how they're similar. I don't know. We'll see where it goes.
See where we take it.
But yeah, okay. So let's start with the Dario Argento one from 77.
77.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And this is probably one of my top 10 favorite horror films, especially in the giallo subgenre of horror, which is
what is giallo? Like, explain that to the listeners / viewers.
Yeah, so giallo means yellow in Italian, and it's basically a subgenre that blends film noir with horror elements. It's overly dramatic. And a little ridiculous. And there's usually a lot of like pop of color. There's a lot of really beautiful scenery and set. And I think they're a lot of fun. If you want to check out more giallo beyond Argento, there's Mario Bava is one of my favorites. Black Cat is such a hoot. There's like a fake cat hand clawing, and that's the villain. It's so good. Giallo is a really fun genre.
One thing I really like about giallo is that it often blends different types of horror subgenres. Like you get like some slasher aspects, and you get like psychological thriller, and you get like psychedelic stuff, and it's just like you kind of never know where it's going to go. And they're the perfect movie to go into without watching a trailer or without knowing what you're in for, because you will be surprised, and you're in for a good time though. Yeah,
like one of my other favorite Argento films is Deep Red. And that one is exactly what you're saying. It's a blend of like a slasher with some like pretty good practical effects for the time and for what Argento was, I think, working with. But also it is like very psychological, and you're challenged to put yourself in the eyes of the character. And Argento is just one of the greats for sure. But Suspiria is probably his most famous film. So it's set in, I believe, Berlin in both films. I believe they're both German ballet schools for girls.
Yes.
And so in both films, Susie is this American girl who comes in to this ballet school and begins studying under the tutelage of these like older women, and it's a boarding school. So Argento himself has said it's vaguely lesbian, but you know, all girls schools, what do you think is going to happen there? It reminded me a lot of
there's no boys, so there's no trouble here.
Yeah, no,
nothing to worry about.
Nothing going on, no smooching, none of that.
Never.
None of that.
But yeah, that is an interesting thing. Like we alluded to at the top of the show, is one of those ones that isn't explicitly queer, but there's enough little nuggets for people like you and I to find.
Yes, the Easter eggs.
Yes,
the little queer Easter eggs.
Yeah.
And I think any sort of any sort of content that has a witch element, because there is in both films very supernatural witch element. I think witch lore and witch culture is another thing that I perceive to be inherently queer, because it's women going against the societal norms of being like in this in this current moment, like trad wives, for example.
And not just that, but women who have empowered themselves.
Indeed.
Like they weren't given this power by anyone else.
Yes, but each other, and they and they imbue this sexuality and this communion with movement and dance, and I love that element in both of these films. And the 1977 film, it's not as prevalent, it's more just like alluded to that they're dancing. But in the 2018 film with Tilda Swinton, it's a very, very heavy predominant element. And the audio, you're focusing on the breath of the dancers and these sharp exhales that are very like almost demonic and dark, and the movements are very angular and very raw and primal. And I think the 2018 film uses dance as more of a narrative function and plot device rather than the 1977. But I think both of them are really wonderful films. Honestly, the first time I saw the 2018 version, I didn't like it that much. But upon rewatching it to come and talk to you today, I actually really appreciated it. There was more of like that queer element that we've been talking about. It was a little bit more overt. We were talking about the relationship between Tilda Swinton, who is like the head mistress of the ballet school or whatever her role is, and Dakota Johnson's character, who is the American girl who comes in from Ohio or wherever she comes from, and is this tour de force in the ballet school. And their relationship and the way that they look each other, like that first moment where they exchange eye contact, where Dakota's dancing and Tilda Swinton just pops into the corner of the room.
It's a powerful moment where they just notice each other.
Yeah,
right?
it is. I'm getting chills. It is like charged. I was like, ooh. I was like, oh,
what's happening?
That's hot.
Or...
What's happening? I'm aroused. I don't know.
So I think it'd probably be good to mention that I found them, like, I actually watched them back to back in preparation for this. So I think there's really significant differences in there that they're almost kind of standalone films. And I think upon rewatching, I was able to be kinder to the 2018 once I watched it right on the back of the 1977.
Yes.
Because then I'd be like, okay, I can see the threads here. But even when it comes to sort of the visceral nature of the stories, like in the Argento version, it's all primary colors, like the most vivid visuals you've ever seen. Like when there's not colors, there's the most insane wallpaper, and the sets are gorgeous.
So
and
good.
like it's a feast for the eyes to the point where like it makes your eyes hungry for the next scene, and you're wondering what's going to happen. And you're watching, and you're almost in a state of disbelief because you're not used to seeing colors and shapes like that on the screen. And
especially in a horror film.
No, especially in a horror film. And I find in the 2018 version, I find that they try, and I think they're still fairly faithful to that, but I think they do it more through like very dramatic dance, and they do it more through sound.
Yes.
Like you were saying with like the panting and the breathing, like it's just like it's something to really draw you in and make you have a visceral connection to this media. So I think that's a way to just not do it blatantly and just not have, primary colors all over the place in 2018 and say like, okay, yeah, this is obviously Suspiria. Like, I don't know if it worked as well for me, but I did like that they tried to honor the spirit in that way.
I agree. Yeah, I think it was like a good way of reflecting in a new way, in a totally different way, the color pops, because I think there's different ways that the filmmakers accented certain feelings or certain emotions in the all mirrored dance room. Like the scene that stuck out most to me was that initial kill where Dakota's dancing in like the room above or below, and these other older witches know exactly what's happening because they're watching her dance, and she's like throwing her body in her hands, and every time she does so, she lands a blow to Olga, this other dancer in this other room.
After Tilda Swinton basically like connects them psychically, essentially.
Exactly, yeah. And I like that the supernatural element was more of a forefront in the 2018 film. It's pointed to in the 1977 version, but I don't think it's as overt, or it's not as like ceremonial or like coven-like as the 2018. But that scene is just like a great example of body horror and the abject and like the repulsiveness of femininity and like the darkness of femininity. And
just how Olga's body just gets twisted and just left there at the end, right? Like
that would be so painful.
It would be so painful, and just some might think a little heavy-handed, but the symbolism of it being in a mirror room and it's being mirrored at top, but like I loved it. I thought it was great. Like
so good.
There's certain things that I didn't work for me as much, being that it was much longer film. I don't feel it needed to be.
Absolutely agree.
Like it's, I like that we got more dancing.
Yes.
I like that the dancing was well choreographed and very intense, and the outfits were incredible.
Beautiful.
And like I enjoyed that. This is where I say that I like to think of them as sort of divergent and completely different pieces, is just some of the narrative choices where we saw a lot more about like the coven and the witches. It was more behind the scenes, whereas in the original one, you're kind of learning at the same time that Susie is. Like, what is happening? Like, we don't know what's going on. Whereas the same, like, similar things are happening in the 2018 one, but you also see the witches, you're like, okay, we're going to do this now.
With their little meat hooks.
Exactly.
Carrying the bodies. Ooh.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Like, I had to mention that. Like, that's ew.
Ooh. And
Yeah,
then
I'm
when,
normal about that.
yeah. Well, then was it Mia Goth's character who kind of like creeps around when they're breaking into the study to look for the files of the missing girls, and then they pop into this other room where some of the witches have these like men kind of suspended or hypnotized, and they're like making fun of their like penises and doing a little light body shaming of these men. But
You can call it light. I'd say that's moderate to severe.
severe, yes, just some light body shaming. But they're using like the meat hook to like poke at the penis, and they're like cackling in like such a distressing way. Like, I think you're right about the audio being a little bit more of like the color pop and that contrast of getting us into this subversive space where they're witches. Like, these are what I would imagine witches to be. Like, they're terrifying.
Yeah. Whereas I think in the original, it was kind of alluded to, and you weren't quite sure. You're like, is this a witchcraft thing?
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas it was like 2018 was kind of straight out the gates with it.
Indeed. Yeah.
Which, I appreciate it in a way, but it's very different to me. I don't know. The thing I'd say probably my biggest qualm with the 2018 version is I just think there's some unnecessary scenes. Like, I think I would have liked it if it was completely contained in the school, honestly.
Me too.
Because that's where, for lack of a better way, that's where the magic happens. That's where all the intrigue is. That's where all the character development is. That's where all the death is. Like, did we really gain anything from like half hour of scenes talking about like Lufthansa Flight 181, which, great, you can just say it's in Germany 1977. People who know that what was happening in Germany 1977 will get it.
We'll appreciate
like
that
they'll know, oh, I understand the cultural context here, but I think it went a little too much into it when it's already a movie that challenges you and makes you think and has some confusing leads and stuff like that. Does it help to add a context and a setting that might be confusing to other people as well? Be like, why are they talking about this hijacking? I don't know about this hijacking. Like, no, focus on like this school, the immaculate choreography, and the horrific murders.
Yes.
Like, why is there a need to pay attention to anything out of that?
They're trying to do too much.
It was a very ambitious film, and I think that's hard to avoid when you're remaking something like the Argento classic, right?
Totally.
Like, it's like, how can you tone it back?
Yeah.
You kind of have to swing for the fences on that one, right?
Which is what the filmmaker did in the end scene, which is where I kind of, to be honest, that's where I kind of got lost. I loved the little like witch naked orgy where you can hear them like grunting in unison, where they're reaching toward the center, where they're harvesting Mia Goth's organs and handing them out to each other. Like, there's something so like sensual and primal about that. And I liked that, but then it just got so absolutely ridiculous. Like the slicing of Tilda's back of her neck so that Dakota Johnson could take over as the new Mother Suspiriorum. I was just like, okay, this is a bit convoluted for me. Like, I love a bloodbath, I do, but I don't know. For me, I was like struggling to find meaning in that.
You feel
scene.
they could have trimmed that down? So
I do.
So if you had the choice, where would you have ended that?
I almost feel
or would
like,
you have switched something in the ending?
Yeah, I agree with you with taking out some of the scenes that were, I think, unnecessarily political when it's already inherently a very political film about like women, power dynamics, sapphic desire, murder, and the supernatural and witches. Like, it's already got so much in it. So I feel like I agree. I would have taken out some of that. And then in terms of the ending, like that's a tough one. I don't know what I would have done other than like, I don't know, like I love the bloodbath, but I don't know like what her motivation was. Like, did she want to maintain the coven? Was she trying to get rid of people who were still in deep allegiance to the past mother? Or like, was it just for fun to see a bunch of blood on the screen and these women dancing in blood? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think it was super clear when it came to like the power struggle that was there. Like, it was definitely, there's a lot of sapphic looks and like longing and things like that implied like that there's some sort of power struggle, but I don't know if that was the best way to explore it.
Yeah.
But
and who was that super like really wrinkly old lady who just kind of like blobbed at the end, like who even was that?
Yeah, I don't know. And I don't know, I felt her dialogue was a little weird at times. Like I think
Like,
that'd be
she's here, like, finally, like, I get it.
like that part's good, but just even like sort of the narration and the oh yes, that's good, do that.
Yes.
Like it kind of took me out of like the drama of it, because when you enter that scene,
Yes.
and then there's these like this choreography with all of these like naked or very scantily clad women doing these like these bizarre moves that are all interacting with each other's bodies in very creative ways, let's say. That goes there, and then it's just like when you have like, I don't know, I felt she kind of took me out of it. Like I think if we went from kind of that bloodbath, kind of call it. I think that's a cool way to end. Just because like the 1977 one ended very abruptly.
It did.
And I kind of liked that.
Me too.
And it's like, it just seems like, yeah, it seemed unnecessarily stretched.
Yeah, and like the man who played the psychiatrist who supported the initial girl who went missing at the very beginning of the film, it ties it all the way back because he suspects something weird is going on at this school. So he attends the performance, he sees Mia Goth's character collapse, he sticks around, they capture him more or less and then bring him into this ritualistic space. And then Dakota Johnson's character spares him. And then he's in bed at the end in his home, presumably, and she comes to him, and it's kind of touched on that she has ingested like his former wife or something. Like she now has the memories of his wife's like last moments in a concentration camp in Germany, and she provides some comfort to him to let him know that she was thinking of him as she passed away due to exposure. But I don't know, like it was a nice scene, but like why?
It was a nice scene, but does this film need to be 6 acts? And was that epilogue even necessary?
Yeah,
like,
I would have ended before that.
It was a nice scene, especially when you don't elaborate that, you know, when a witch consumes someone, they acquire their memories, or however that happens. Like the fact that is left to be one of the mysterious powers.
Sure.
'Cause, like, there's things that you kind of understand, like, okay, you can do this to make someone control someone else's body. And you can do these sort of like mind controlling things, and you do that. Like we've established that those are, you know, powers that you gain when you're in a powerful position in this coven. But like that, to my knowledge, wasn't one of the ones that they had touched on. It's like, oh yeah, this too.
And also this. And like also, how would that have even happened? Because if his wife died in a concentration camp years and years ago, how would this witch, unless one of the former witches was with her when she died and then survived? You know what I mean?
I kind of read it as maybe that she was part of the coven at some point, or maybe I think there's a direct line with her somewhere, maybe 1 or 2 degrees away. To bring it back to Kevin Bacon and the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, like a couple degrees from it. Like I think she was fairly close to the school / coven, whatever it is. But
that makes sense.
Again, that's the thing, is if you're having these extraneous scenes, you know, explain it a little.
So tenuous. Because we saw her photo in his office. I believe that's her anyway. Like that's really never explained who that woman is that the beginning character slams down because she's afraid of being perceived by the other witches in the coven through the eyes of whomever in his office space. But yeah, there's so much that I feel like could have been just like left so that like the dancing scenes and some of the like creepier death blood orgy scenes had more of a chance to be louder and have more of an impact.
Yeah, I agree. Like it's an interesting to balance when you're trying to make yourself different from a very distinctive, very beloved movie. And I saw a description of the 1977 Suspiria, which I like. Is like one of my big problems with Giallo movies is that it's like, okay, there's like a horrific scene, and then there's talking, so much talking, then horrific murder, and then awkward talking.
And the dialogue is so bad.
Exactly. And like Argento fixed that by having the talking happen with amazing wallpaper.
Yes. At least I'm looking at something pretty.
And you're trying to figure out something that is not directly copying that, right? Because like would you say there's any sort of modern day Giallo films, or is it something that kind of existed for a brief moment in time?
That's a really good question. I feel like from what I know of Giallo, it was kind of time-based, but I'm sure there's still people making Giallo films just in a more updated modern version, because Argento is still making films. I don't know if they're watchable. I've tried, but, I'm glad he's still around doing it. But to me, his newer films are not giallo at all.
No, from what I've seen, I wouldn't say so either.
Yeah.
Maybe just a cultural context thing.
Possibly. Yeah. As a non-Italian person, I'll just have to ask an Italian.
Yeah, just any random Italian, they will know.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm not actually saying that seriously. That's the Rainbow Connection podcast does not believe that all Italians share a hive mind.
Are there any honorable mentions that we want to discuss?
We can go through honorable mentions and stuff like that. Do you have any?
Well, when I was looking for... Sorry, I'll intro that a little bit.
Okay. Let's actually... Do you want to just go into it, and I'll ask you about honorable mentions?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just going to quickly check and see if there's... No. I was going to go back to the email I sent to go for questions, but I think we're good for questions. We'll just go honorable mentions. So because we've been talking for a while, hey?
Yep.
Okay, so I think that's been some great conversations about some amazing queer, if not overtly queer, but kind of queer-coded films in the horror genre. And we all watched, by we all, I mean the two of us, we watched 6 films in preparation for having these conversations. But are there any that weren't on the list that you think give an honorable mention to?
Oh, so many, especially when I was thinking about like queer vampire films. Like, vampires are inherently like queer polyamorous icons, and so there was it was tough to pick. I think classic Interview with a Vampire is very, very queer, very lovely. The relationship between Lestat and I'm forgetting the other vampire's name, but their relationship is very interesting to behold when looking at it through like a queer horror, queer media lens.
Dare I also say Lesbos Vampiros?
Yes,
well?
Of course. Very obvious.
Very
good
subtle.
Choice. Yes, very subtle. I was also thinking, as you know, to bring in Jesus Christ Vampire Hunter, which is a Canadian film from 2003, I want to say. It's like a horror comedy. But Jesus basically hunts down vampires because in this film, they've gained the ability to move and exist in sunlight because there's been a skin grafting procedure. It's very convoluted and very entertaining. You can watch it for free on YouTube if you're interested. But Jesus is like protecting certain vampires and then like killing others and then protects the lesbians. Like, it's a very, very interesting piece of film. So that one was also on my radar.
Now.
Very much. Yes, absolutely. Those would probably be 2 of my main picks. And also just like because I love Aaliyah so much, and that was probably one of my like queer awakenings was Queen of the Damned for sure.
Very nice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, those are some good picks for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And as I alluded to earlier, like recent one, it's not quite in the same genre, but I really enjoyed. At the risk of sounding cliche, I saw the TV Glow. I thought it was a really great gender representation of sort of the journey and the terror. And I'd also say, let's go for more recent ones. I'd say another one that is not overtly queer, but kind of beloved by the queers would be The Substance as well. Like it's another one extremely queer coded.
Uh-huh.
And if you get it, you get it.
Yes.
It's a challenging watch at times. It's got some difficult visuals, but may surprise no one to find that trans people tend to gravitate towards body horror.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because that's what we live a lot of the times, right? So it's like, hey, this isn't where I'm supposed to be, or I don't have control over what's happening, or this isn't the path that I would have chosen for my body. So there's generally, I think anything that is body horror has an inherent sort of like a trans appeal to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's, you can't really go wrong with that. Like it's terrifying to watch when you think about it, but like a lot of times there'll be like a trans person sitting back watching, like, yeah, okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Seems about right.
Yeah, and like I know werewolf films and body horror are not synonymous, but I would say like werewolf films are pretty good example of body horror, and I know that's been mentioned in a lot of queer horror spaces, is the ability to witness that transformation in body into something that is maybe uncomfortable or surprising at first, but you lean into it. And I don't know if there's any resonance for you with werewolf films, but I was definitely thinking through like Ginger Snaps even is a really great like honorable
classic
mention.
Canadian cinema as well. Like it's love Ginger Snaps, and I was thinking about that, and thank you for bringing that to forefront because I had momentarily forgot, but that is an excellent choice. And okay, I'm just gonna start listing movies now. Like, you know,
Jennifer's Body.
That was the next one I was going to. Geez, okay, just get out of my brain. But yes, Jennifer's Body, an absolute, you know, sapphic classic, and how can you go wrong with that? Like it's brilliant. Everyone should watch it. I assume most people who've you know are tuning into this have probably seen it. If they have any interest in queer horror, like that's one of the top of the list ones, I'd say.
Definitely. So fun.
Anything else you can think of, since you're in my brain as well and you're like driving both of these like meat vessels on this trail?
Oh gosh. I mean, I feel like Ginger Snaps, Jennifer Body were like honorable mentions for me that I wish we could have gotten into, but there really is like so much. And even like thinking through like the narratives from Frankenstein and how queer people resonate with like monster horror is another good one. Like Frankenstein, of course, vampires, Dracula, but Frankenstein and that like reanimation into this like foreign body and the way that body is policed and vilified by others is just like forever like Mary Shelley, queer icon.
We generally just love a misunderstood monster, or that is only a monster because society deems them such, right? Like there's so many stories like that we all latch onto. And it's very interesting that it's probably not intentional a lot of the time.
Yeah, it's like a subconscious.
If someone's like, I'm going to make this kaiju movie, and this kaiju is really ostracized, then, you know, the queer's like, oh, it's me.
Yeah, like, I understand you. I get
this giant turtle being thing. It's like, why do they hate you? You didn't do this.
Don't even get me started on Godzilla.
Oh, no, that'd be a whole other thing.
That's a whole nother episode.
It would be, but like, yeah, so you even know the kaiju I'm talking about. All right, well, I think that sounds like a pretty good place to wrap things up. Like, you know, we tackled some tough things, we had some challenging moments, and we had some laughs. I think it's good to end on the laugh, right? So once again, thanks everyone for tuning into the Rainbow Connection podcast. Thank you again to my guest, Brittany Rudyck. And if people are looking to follow you or catch up on you, where can they do that?
I'm all over the place. I host The History of Punk on Monday mornings on CJSR 88.5 FM. And you can follow me on Instagram if you want, where I talk about drum and bass and horror movies and my criminology degree and everything in between at BRUDYCK. And yeah, catch me around town at a drum and bass show near you.
Perfect. And again, I'm your host, Allison Hadley, here on the Rainbow Connection podcast. You can follow us at Rainbow Con Pod on Instagram and listen to us wherever you listen to podcasts.